We the people, ABCAmbaTV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa with untold stories, Africa's best.
Good evening and welcome to Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. Citizens of La République du Cameroon are still to come to terms with the drama of power amongst institutions and persons. The law in La République du Cameroon is under some particular group of persons a reverse of the normal. Normality observes and states that nobody is above the law, but nobody is above for La République du Cameroun simply means that government officials, people in political positions are above the law. And in such a kangaroo system, individuals twist the law to suit their greed and purpose. We've seen bad government usually being a huge part of crisis in most corrupt countries. And tonight we look at the untold stories of the flawed crisis in Nigeria that has attracted the donation of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry Foundation. That is after Duchess Sussex 41 revealed she is 43% Nigerian due to a genealogy test a couple of years ago. We have high peaks and far-reaching stories for you tonight, and we can't wait to bring these and more, but only after the prime headlines.
These are the prime headlines for today. Major General Tokandu, commander of the Boy Warriors, gives a stern warning to toothless propagandists. Today we will be reviewing Quiz W.J. Roberts' 10 critical observation. I'm sure you want us to review that again. Also today, innocent young man killed by Colonial La Republic the Cameroon military in Bali Combat local government area. Also today, La Republique du Cameroon SG at the presidency rubbishes court decision beefs up security around him. On the foreign scene, we will be looking at Putin, how he says the risks of the world conflict is high, and also Moscow officials call for desanitization in the Ukraine. And in sports, World Cup 2022, Australia plays criticize human rights record of host Qatar in the video.
The media greatly influences society. They inform people about what is happening. It permeates people's lives by creating their own criteria and opinions. In this way, the media moves the masses, creating different social movements.
For over 60 years, the people of Ambazonia were deprived of such privileges. The privilege to enhance their own criteria and opinion. They have suffered cultural genocide for 6 long decades, but not in this age and not with undaunted ABC Amber News on board.
You must understand that wars are fought and won in the media. The speed of the revolution on Ambazonia's quest for freedom cannot be explained without highlighting the diligent use of the media.
Franco-Cameroon colonizers, among other strategic moves, weaponized the media against Ambazonia force, and they continue to do so even today. The question would be, how much do the oppressed people of Ambazonia need to counter the media rage?
Indeed, how much more is required to stop the genocide? The carnage in Ambazonia didn't start today. In 1961, 1972, 1984, 1992, Ambazonians were slaughtered in huge numbers and help was not forthcoming. Why? Because the oppressor was the piper in the media.
The good news is we have what it takes to dictate the pace.
Right now, ABCAmbaTV is taking advantage of the wonders of multimedia aggressively
to inform the misinformed and disinformed with undaunted and other revolutionary programs bringing it to the news untold stories.
Most importantly, the media work by taking ABCAmbaTV into every multimedia platform.
In a word, where the importance of storytelling can never be overemphasized, Ambazonians has to tell her own story, not the other way round.
And like we say it always, Ambazonia must narrate her story accurately. We can do this together, you know, right? You are just a click away. Visit our website at www.abcambatv.com, and the steps are quite simple.
With just a click on the website, you can become a club member with so many benefits.
You can also make a one-time donation, advertise and showcase your goods and services at the marketplace on the website.
That was easy, right? You're welcome on board.
And thank you for opting for the winning team.
Major General Tokan during a video did not mince his words, castigating Tata Wolskandi, who according to him is a mere toothless propagandist who hides under the guise of taking care of the refugee and does not contribute a dime to foster the struggle, but on the contrary, intoxicates the fighters through the Bui Unity Warriors to fight the Bui Warriors and kill one another. Major General Tokandu is categorical that Shea Tata Wars Candy is an opportunist and a liability to the struggle for can neither come to Bui County and hold the gun nor support the fighters financially, but on the contrary, tries hard to pull the fingers at loggerhead, pitting them against one another. Ambazonians, this is where we will begin the full briefings of Undaunted tonight. I am Oyi Opala. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Onyi. Good evening, fellow Ambazonians. Rhetorically, Major Tokendu opined that if everyone was in Nigeria, who will fight and urges the propagandist to come to Bui if he is courageous and fight and stop making empty noises and empty videos on social media, and finally warned him to stop attributing the exploits and bravery of the Bui warriors to Unity warriors in his bid to belittle the efforts of the mighty Bui warriors, discredit them, and hijack their victories in favor of his so-called Unity warriors. There is a video here of Tokendu.
All this fake and the falsehood where una dey parade am, especially that fool wey dey for Nigeria wey una dey call you Woskandi, wey don try his best see and say me Chakara all fighter them for who front, especially the one them for Bui. May take care. I want me challenge me. May don't talk and do. If you be man picking enough, may challenge me, may come for home front. Come make that rubbish for home front. The fact that they ever talk, and you should not quiet, you know, mean I don't know how to talk, and I don't know nothing to talk. But I want to tell you, may take time. And I want for one all my brothers they were there for home front. I call and say my brothers. How when I don't bury when I say, they take orders from that fool where they for Nigeria, when they ever contribute no 1 franc to support his struggle back for home front. When they take orders from me, they make them how when they make them so. In the end, when I go see shout, had I known. May all we will not say, had I known, it's always the last thing. When I go see talk, had I known, at the end. I thank you now, my people from Amazonia. When I stay safe, when I stay put, when I stay calm, we warriors go ever there we warriors as how we ever be. As I, Major General talk and do, I be tell you now. We not go ever kill this name, we warriors. We go ever remain we warriors. As when I talk, they make that with a foolish video them. I want more that challenge me for war. I want more that challenge me that would work. When I not challenge me that for the cash my them, they make false videos, they share them on social media every day. I want more that challenge me that would work. Yes. If you challenge me with work, I will tell you I say on a cafe good day for up. But if you not then for the make falsehood videos, with my picking them on a cash and they send them for social media, they share them for WhatsApp for us. I will only laugh una. Now two picking una cash and the other one will run when a chief man come join una, na 3 where una hula for this. Una see my battalion. I will present them for 1st October when I be seen and fine. I'm not sure say that 3 where una cash out. Make that falsehood. It will shake my battalion in Nigeria. And our spirit for war and our spirit for work, you know, will shake. It will also stand for some percent, 100%. The spirit will stand for you. Now, my promise is you are the country.
You've heard it from the horse's mouth. Major General Tokendu told the Unity Warriors in the face to remain themselves, fight themselves, stop intimidation, and leave the Bui warriors alone because, according to him, only the truth shall set us free, as his 3 fighters gone to Unity Warriors had been intoxicated by no pity, even though one of them was of doubtful morals involving in theft. He regretted that infighting brought to bear through Unity Warriors has brought setbacks as Bui Warriors lost their major key players like the vibrant Chacha and Sobu and others, but as a well-focused soldier, he urged all well-wishers to remain calm, remain focused, and stay safe, stay put, as the Bui Warriors shall never fall no matter the level of intimidation. Talk and do remains with Bui Warriors from foundation. Anyone should dare talk and do and see, Bui Warriors shall never die, he assured.
Now it is worthy to note here that the advent of the so-called Unity Warriors has caused more harm than good in this liberation quest. The valiant restoration forces in Bui County, Ngokentuja, and Dongaman counties have suffered serious setbacks from their infiltration, having lost several valiant fighters in that arrangement and an agenda that only No PT and their sponsors know about. All right, some time ago, we brought you a report by Chris W.J. Ribbert. And in that report, it was a 10-point agenda titled Observation. Well, it was Chris W.J. Ribbert that came up with the critical observation. A few days after we observed from the happenings and realized that the Canada Conference was not any form of negotiation. It was just a gathering of La République du Cameroon, some civil organizations, and the rest. Now, it was also Chris W.J. Robert in his first point agenda that he says that the best permanent solution to their Anglophone crisis would be a transparent, inclusive, negotiated peace process leading to a free and fair, internationally supervised referendum that included a clear question on institutional arrangement, including independence that would solve a historical wrong committed first in 1961 under British and UN auspices, and again in 1972. Well, I'll take a break from there. Now, when you listen or when you look at that statement critically, you would say that it is actually productive. Now, why Amazonians are not yet done digesting that? Meanwhile, I must also note here that Chris W. Jervibot is a lobbyist and an advisor for his paymaster. So this statement is not constructive and conducive to Southern Cameroonians and Ambazonia. Now, why Ambazonians are digesters? We see these on the paper. Canada not fronting any referendum on Anglophone crisis. Well, he doesn't see the Cameroon as two in the first place. He doesn't see that there is a difference between La République du Cameroon and, of course, Southern Cameroon and Berzonia. So you can fold that statement from every angle. But there is a whole lot to say, but most importantly, President Samuel Ikome Sako sees whatever that happened in the Canada conference as a mere monologue.
Because it is intellectually dishonesty for someone to ignore the historicity and legality of Ambazonia's liberation movement and cause. This is exactly what Chris WJ is doing in his supposed proposal for the international community to consider. And like you already know, Ambazonia have been categoric against his opinion on these subjects. They believe that the subject of referendum as a way forward is fraudulent. The 1961 referendum was a fraud and one of the root causes of the war going on now. I'll hasten to say that whatever meeting or dialogue or negotiation, or you could call it conversation, to be held by both parties for lasting solution must be in the spirit of the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 1608, Article 5.
All right, so in an exclusive interview, Canada not fronting any referendum on Anglophone crisis, High Commissioner is saying. Now, the High Commissioner says that Canada is not fronting any referendum. If this is true, of which we are aware that it is true, it only means that the Guardian Cameroon news is a disinformation and misinformation war strategy.
Now, disinformation and misinformation is a war strategy, and that's why La République du Cameroon are greatly employing that. We'll be following in-depthly what the Canadian High Commissioner had to say about the whole Canada conference subsequently in our subsequent news.
We the people, ABCAmbaTV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa. With untold stories, Africa's best.
Now unable to confront the valiant Ambazonia Restoration Forces ARFs, La République du Cameroon failed military indulges in multiple excesses committed on innocent peace-loving Ambazonians, which today are unfathomable. Today is Bali-Kumbat local government area. Yesterday, it was Jakiri local government area, after Kumba local government area, and other local government areas where denizens are gone down for flimsy or immaterial issues.
Now, Undaunted has gathered that on Sunday, October 23rd, 2022, La République du Cameroon's colonial soldiers allegedly killed a young man in Balikumbat, local government area in Ngokitunja County, who was picked up from the small market and taken to the council premises. Eyewitnesses report say the victim was later brought back to the small market in the night, where the forces made spontaneous searches on the population. Denizens without ID cards had 1,000 francs CFA for women and 5,000 francs CFA for men extorted from them after collecting enough The report went on. The thieves in uniform, calling themselves soldiers, later chased everyone from a nearby bar and took control of the bar and started drinking.
Now it is said that the young man was later killed at an unholy hour at about 3 a.m. and his body was dumped around the small market square with one placed on his chest in Jakiri local government area recently. The colonial military collected up to 8,000 francs CFA from those who could not present their identification papers, while Kumba local government area, some people paid up to 1,500, I beg your pardon, 15,000 francs CFA for similar reasons. Some concerned Amazonians have reacted to this open-air stealing, one-term arrest, and indiscriminate killings of innocent denizens by the Creole Genocidal La République du Cameroon military.
Now, the military has been given the freedom to kill on sight. The military leaders in the region remain silent. Political leaders remain silent. The so-called elites and religious leaders remain silent as thousands and countless innocent youths are targeted and killed by a genocide military. God is still watching. This is against human rights. We are treated like dogs. Why in a country we call land of peace? Where is the peace? Tell me, if this is happening every day, how would people not pick up weapons for self-defense? The military of the La République du Cameroon have kept this track record of shooting to kill unarmed innocent civilians whom they claim to protect. If you doubt me, ask them who killed the people or kids in Ngabo. What else can a terrorist do? Kill unarmed civilians? Today, six of their terrorist colleagues joined ABCAMA, and those that have gone before them due to their terrorism, time will catch up with them and they will meet their fate. In Kumba local government area recently, Undaunted gathered that elements of the Colonial Republic du Cameroon's police forces have been storming neighborhoods, conducting random searches, and making indiscriminate arrests of innocent and vulnerable denizens without any warrant.
Undaunted was made to understand that those arrested are taken to the occupier La République du Cameroon colonial police station, where they are forced to negotiate their release with money. Denizens cry on their anonymity that for some weeks now, the colonial police has been going arresting people for no just cause for what is referred to in their enemy language, Calais Calais, and victims have been known to pay up to 15,000 francs CFA before being released. The amount varies. Undaunted land, that the amount varies actually, and that is life in all Amazonian, full of uncertainty since the octogenarian monarch declared their senseless war in 2017.
We the people, ABCAmbaTV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa with untold stories, Africa's best.
Citizens of La République du Cameroon are still to come to terms with the drama of power amongst institutions and persons. The law in La République du Cameroon is under some particular group of persons a reverse of the normal. Normality observes and states that nobody is above the law. Nobody is above the law simply means that the government official, personal government is above the law. But in a kangaroo system like that of La République du Cameroon, individuals twist the law to suit their greed and purpose. Now, according to information from certified sources, the prosecution of the Special Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant against the all-powerful Secretary General of La République du Presidency, but he has refused to appear before the judges and has rather increased the number of B's elements around his residence. While the La République du Cameroon ruler Paul Biya continues to remain silent for the judiciary to be mocked by an individual, how can the Rapid Intervention Battalion B stand behind an individual against the state, which is the court?
Now, the beer reinforces the security of Ngongo under the scope of a warrant. From a well-introduced source, security is reinforced around the home of the Secretary General of the Presidency of La République du Cameroon. Ferdinand Ngongo is subject to an arrest warrant issued last week by the Special Criminal Court. It is in this momentum that we learn that security is reinforced around the home of the Secretary General of the Presidency of Ferdinand Ngongo had been summoned physically on October 18th by the investigators in order to be heard there within the framework of the COVID gate. A scandal following several cases of embezzlement of public funds and overbilling documented by a report of the Court of Auditors, quote, under the threat of arrest in connection with the execution of the arrest warrant of the Attorney General of the Special Criminal Court, TCS, Ferdinand Ngongo, in a hooligan behavior, had reinforced since this week the workforce of the BIR around his home, adds in the same sense the journalist and whistleblower Boris Bertolt. Now, under the scope of a warrant to bring Ngongo for the judges, Ngongo therefore locked himself up in his villa in Bastos with an impressive BIR battalion assigned on occasion by the Israeli Moaz Aaron, his accomplice in the Portsec affair, where 53 billions of our unfortunate Francis have taken the direction of tax havens. And even more serious matters than the scandal of the COVID-19, he continues. We remember that such a device had already been put in place around Cyrus Ngo, his trusted Director General of the PAD, during the attempt to execute the arrest warrant issued against the latter by the Court of First Instance of Douala, Bonanjo, in the Kana Boys case. He continued, the presence of the heavy presence of the elements of the BIR at Ferdinand Ngongo residence executive, the assignment of the courts is difficult.
Now, with this challenging of the decision of the Kangaroo Court by the close collaborator of La République du Cameroon, ruler Paul Biya, Biya has maintained a sealed lip. What if it was an Ambazonian that a warrant of arrest was issued against? Will the Biya protect him and prevent the execution of the court's decision? That's a huge question. All right. Right about now, we'll move further with this next story, Frank Biya versus Ngongo Ferdinand. Well, a clan struggle which leads to an institutional crisis than a possible political crisis. Well, we have been reporting this story since Tuesday, but because of the fire looming in La République du Cameroon, we need to go even deeper. Michael Bietong always says the right things. He understands the historical and technicality of the Amazonian story accurately. He has played a lot of role in educating the people on the legality of this struggle. Now, let's get his view on this Ferdinand Ngongo story. Now, the case line is 94/64, Jean Perret from the Bilangad and Tax Department case. He says, as the moment of a possible political transition approaches, legal cases on the background of a succession battle at the top of the state, and they are actually increasing. The curiosity in this clan struggle is that they take place in the Betty Bulu political lobby, the famous Esangan that the infamous Cameroonian Jean Fauchav of late memory called the clan.
Now, on the one hand, the Bulu clan, which serves only by Frank Biya, and on the other hand, the Nanga clan, whose torchbearer is Ferdinand Ngongo, the all-powerful Secretary General at the presidency and close to the First Lady Chantal Biya. Frank Biya and the favorite Bulu clan. In this now open war between the two clans, the so-called Bulus seem to have the upper hand because this clan controls justice used to neutralize potential adversaries, public finances, the army, the police, the security of the Palace of Unity, and the president, as well as the secret services, both inside and outside. In this group, we find key men such as the Minister of Justice, Lauren Esso, the Minister of Finance, Louis Paul Nmotaze, the Director of the Civil Council, Samuel Mvondo Ayolo, the Director of Presidential Security, Ivo DeSancio Yenwo, the Commander of the Presidential Guard, Colonel Beko Abondo, Rear Admiral Fuda Joseph, Special Advisor to Paul Biya, the General Delegate for National Security, Boss of the Police and Internal Intelligence, Martin Mbarga Ngwele, the Minister of Defense, Joseph Betty Asomo, Director of the General Directorate of External Research, DGRE, Echo Masimi. Without forgetting the all-powerful businessman and de facto treasurer of the clan, Jean-Pierre Amugo Belinga, president of the press group L'Anecdote, whose TV channel Vision 4 had the first information on the warrant to bring against Ngo. Another important asset of this group, the support of France. Cameroon remains a preserve despite the sovereignist speeches of Cameroonian leaders to Frank Biya. France is angry with Ngo for having, among other things, entrusted the port of Douala, built by France in the early 1920s, to his men and the security of the strategic infrastructure, like that of the airport, to Israel.
All right, let's look at this other point. Mikel dropped Ngongo Ferdinand soon the fall. Whatever people say, the future is disappointing for the man from Minter who no longer hides his presidential ambition. His network of influence will not be able to reverse the course of events in his favor. On the security side, Ferdinand Ngongo controls the Rapid Intervention Battalion, a special army unit whose commander, the Israeli Iran was, is a personal friend. But opposite, the Bees, a large detachment of which provides security for the presidential palace, is the Presidential Guard and Security, the last belt around their head of state. Ngongo Ferdinand also cannot count on the support of the sulphurous Minister of Territorial Administration and no less boss of the National Security Council in charge of centralizing intelligence, Paul Atanga Nje. The latter has a dispute with the Special Criminal Court, before which he answers for his responsibility in the management of COVID-19 funds.
Now, to save face, he will be forced to deliver and then let go of his godfather, the same for Galax Etoga, the boss of the National Gendarmerie, who cannot be of any use to him. From the intelligence point of view, his darling Colonel Bankwi Emily, commander of the Military Security Division, is on the verge of retirement. To hope to bounce back, he will feel obliged to put himself at the service of the clan, having the favor of the forecast. On the finance side, Ngo cannot count on his henchman, Modeste Mopa, at the head of the tax department because the taxes collected are paid into the state treasury account housed at the Bank of Central African States, BEAC. Recall that president of the Central African States Development Bank, of which the BEAC is one of shareholders, is none other than Evu Meku, nephew of Paul Biya, that is to say, brother of Frank Biya. Both, all like Motaze, are involved in the affair of the embezzlement of several billions of a linked to zero coupon treasury bonds, which broke in 2012. You see the link? In terms of justice, Ngo only controls the Supreme State Audit, the starting point par excellence of the affairs of Operation Sparrowhawk. It is this body which, on the orders of the SGPR, opens investigations into the management of budget lines 94 and 65 in order to attack the Bulu clan. But this investigation will have no legal follow-up. The Special Criminal Court, TCS, created in 2011 by the late Jean Fumain Akame, a member of the Bulu clan, being controlled by Frank Biya's men.
All that remains for Uncle Ferdinand is the First Lady as support. But how far will these tandem, which has the gift of having paralyzed the entire country, go? Now, let's also look at the role that Chantal Biya will play for Ngongo. We should do anything at all costs or at nothing? Now, it is clear that Ngongo's refusal to comply with the summons of the TCS magistrate and the use of the B's element to protect himself from any forceful arrest in execution of the arrest warrant issued by the TCS Georgia of his omnipotence. From well-informed sources, Paul Biya would have received Ferdinand Ngongo in audience at the palace of Unity last Monday evening to reassure him of his support. Hence the lifting of the arrest warrant against him. This does in any way mean the cancellation of legal proceedings against him. The man remains on borrowed time. Chantal Biya, meanwhile, swears Ngongo or nothing. Indeed, it comes back to us from reliable sources that Chantal Biya opposes any ministerial reshuffle that would take away her godson Ngongo. But Paul Biya, under pressure from the French and the Bulu clan, wants to get rid of it. What to do? Once hidden, the clan struggle within the Republican institution is now open.
To get out of it and put Frank Biya in the hot seat, you have to break the Biya and Ungo locks. But how? The possible scenario with regards first to the First Lady is to remove her from the presidential palace and even from the country. This task could be entrusted to the agents of Commissioner Echo of the DGRE in connection with the elements of the DGSE French intelligence on duty at the French embassy in Yaoundé. He could be offered, for example, by a member of his circle of friends, a tourist trip abroad in France, Switzerland, or the USA, and while she stays there, Paul Biya reshuffles the government. For his power and his relations with the French, Paul Biya can do without his wife. Remember Jean-Irene Biya?
All right, as for Ngongo Ferdinand, the strategy of his neutralization could be aimed at isolating him from state affairs. Article 4 of Decree number 2, 2011-412 of 9th December, reorganizing the presidency of the Republic provided for delegation of signature for SGPR deputies for specific tasks. This legal mechanism could be triggered so that Paul Alongche or Mohamedou Mustafa is now the transmission belt between the government, the services attached to the presidency, and Paul Biya. As for the bill, have to do is make promises of money and promotion to the heads of different components of his body, and Ngongo is cornered. Thus, a new government can be put in place, and the Bulu clan will thus be able to reposition its powers in view of the battle for the conquest of power by Frank Biya, even if nothing is completely acquired for the later.
Now, the Northern clan on the lookout and the Americans to the rescue of Marafa. When the members of Esinang tear each other apart, the clan of Northerners in ambush has not said its last words since the resignation of the first president, Amadou Ahidjo, and the liquidation of hundreds of senior army and gendarmerie officials from the north after the failed coup of April 6, 1984. The Northern political lobby has lost all influence that it either on security, the army, intelligence, and the public treasury in Cameroon. The incarceration of Marafa Hamido Yaya in 2012 dashed all the hopes of Northerners to return to power along the north-south axis desired by the French colonizers. But the northern part of the country can still count on a very large number of businessmen who can be useful just in case. Since December 2020, a rebel movement called the Movement for the Liberation of Cameroon has been on standby in the far north. On September 16th, the president of the National Assembly, Cavaye Yegri Djibril, informed the transitional authorities of the arms trafficking activities carried out by the parliamentarian Kamsulum Abba Kabir.
Moreover, in an article recently published by an American diplomatic review, the former U.S. ambassador to Cameroon, Niels Makudit, pleaded for the release of former Minister Marafa Hamidou Yaya, who, according to the diplomat, is a victim of political ambition. Is this the manifestation of the possible support of the USA to the clan of the North? While still the far North does not intend to stay on the sidelines at this time, when we are talking about a war of succession, either way, Cameroon's political future is bleak, with the specter of civil war looming hot in front. Well, this article is from Miguel. All right, we'll move to the next story. Compromised and traitor defined in context with explanatory notes.
And this one is by Bridget Muyang Fielding. She says leaders usually make the error of considering critics as their enemies, whereas these only hold up the mirror to them, or if you will, light their path that they may see and not stumble. Can you imagine what governance would be like without watchdogs? Amazonia's case is different because more than a usual percentage of the population is playing critic and watchdog. This is understandable considering where we are coming from and what we have been through. It is also proof of the people's desperation and commitment to see homeland free. Southern Cameroon's history is fraught with traitors and compromised individuals. For affliction not to rise a second time, Amazonians are alert in every move, word, and action from its leaders, and aspiring leaders are very scrutinized.
Now, the words traitor and compromise are consequently very current in our lexicon. What do these two words really mean in the Amazonian struggle? Follow me as I consult the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary for our edification. In the context of negotiation, compromise in itself is largely positive as no solution can be arrived at without consensus. In the Amazonian context, conceding on independent restoration is out of the question. The second definition of the term in the Oxford Dictionary, not quoted, suits the context of this write up, and it will dwell. Compromise. The past tense is compromised, past participle compromise as well. Now, expediently accept standards that are lower than is desirable. Now, we were not prepared to compromise on safety, weaken or harm by accepting standards that are lower than is desirable.
Now, the term compromised is used in the context of the Amazonian struggle to describe those who were seen to be standing in the way of homeland independence restoration by opposing a genuine international initiatives for negotiation, by causing confusion amongst the Amazonian restoration forces, or by doing other seemingly harmless things to derail or delay the expected outcome. Anybody who does one of the above violates two fundamental principles of the struggle, diplomacy and self-defense, and in the process compromises the struggle and is therefore compromised. The Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary has this long list of synonyms for the word under study, compromised. There's some synonyms like undermine, weaken, be detrimental, to damage, injure, harm, do harm to, prejudice, be prejudicial to, jeopardize, endanger, imperil, bring into disrepute, reflect badly on, put in a bad light, discredit, dishonor, bring shame to, shame, embarrass.
In the light of the above definition and synonyms, it is clear that one does not necessarily have to receive an envelope from the enemy to compromise the struggle or to be compromised as it is generally believed. Those who get compromised by the enemy were compromised from the very beginning by their lust. Yaoundé cannot corrupt a leader unless there is ground good enough on which to sow the corrupting seed. These usually are vaulting ambition, power mongering, lust for filthy loss, and lack of compassion for one's own people. These compromising traits push one to downplay what others do, to find fault where none exists. They use many words and are in saying nothing, hoping that the listener will make mistake and probably lose the voice. Mostly they have failed, but gullible will always be deceived.
Now, in the light of the above, many Amazonians have compromised the struggle in more ways than they know by undermining, weakening, being detrimental to, damaging, injuring, harming, doing harm to, causing prejudice to, being prejudicial to, jeopardizing, endangering, imperiling, bringing into disrepute, reflecting badly on, putting Amazonia in a bad light, discrediting, dishonoring, bringing shame to, and embarrassing the struggle and the Amazonian people. A compromised individual is a threat to the cause and is consequently a traitor. What does the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary say specifically about traitor? Traitor, a noun, it's said to be somebody, something, a person who betrays their friends, their country, etc., by giving away secrets about them, by lying to or about them, or by doing other things that will harm them. I pray every Ambazonia to examine their actions, inactions, and declarations in the light of the above definitions. Compromised and traitor are directly connected. One must get compromised first to be a traitor. Consider the following happenings that have bedeviled the struggle to determine whether you are compromised and are a traitor of some sort. In any other one, do you believe them? Didn't they say the Swiss-led process was a farce because according to Yawunde's note of commitment, it was not published for all to see. What did traitors do soon as Yawunde pulled out of the SLP, the Swiss-led mediation process? Shamelessly, they dived straight into bed with the enemy, keeping the people in the dark about the agenda, another narrow agenda of the Ottawa night out. Why? Because it is evil. How can Amber Patriots strike a deal of secrecy with the enemy against their people? What happened to transparency? In the process, the principle of third-party internationalization was compromised. Treachery, most despicable impostors.
All right, so let's ask, did you help in any way to pull down the Swiss-led process in favor of direct negotiation? Have you betrayed the position of the Ambazonia Restoration Forces to the enemy? Were you in a position to alert the Ambazonia Restoration Forces that the enemy was creeping in on them and did not? Have you deliberately done anything that has delayed the process and progress of the Ambazonian struggle? Are you doing anything that gives the enemy an alibi not to engage in genuine negotiation? Have you endangered the Ambazonia Restoration Forces and made vulnerable our people by embezzling a dollar from struggle coffers?
More things to look out for is, have you told lies to frame up performing leadership in order to destabilize the movement? Have you kept quiet in the presence of wrongdoing, whereas your condemnation would have given the people direction and saved the bad situation? Have you set up a brother, neighbor, rival as an amber fighter, either sympathizer, so that they are arrested and locked up and exploited by the enemy? Did you split the interim government to weaken the movement, cause confusion, and project self? Have you sought to personalize the struggle, putting your interest before the people? Have you asked the Amazonian Restoration Forces to slow down to enable in favor of your liberation from jail before the real fighting can start? Have you used the struggle to settle personal scores and reap off the desperate? Have you lied, given false information about the struggle so as to give the international community a wrong perception as to who controls the home front? Did you bring the deal? Did you lead the struggle to conmen and fake suppliers? Did you purchase fake RPGs? If you're guilty of any of the above and of any other thing hindered or is hindering the progress of this cause, then you are a traitor, compromised to the marrow, compromise the cause. Oxford's not my definitions. Repent now. Do not take the Amazonian people for granted for too long. Tomorrow might be too late.
We the people, ABCAmbaTV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa with untold stories, Africa's best.
As you know, those were some words from Bridget Muyang. Now moving on into Nigeria. The flood in Nigeria. The flooding in Nigeria has been affecting more parts of the country in only a matter of weeks. Devastating floods have been blamed on heavy rains and water released from a dam in neighboring Cameroon. There's a lot we'll be looking at tonight into the Nigerian flood scenario. But then, after this very short break, we'll be back with that story.
We the people, ABCAmbaTV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa with untold stories, Africa's best. We the people, ABCAmbaTV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa with untold stories, Africa's best.
The media greatly influences society. They inform people about what is it. It permeates people's lives by creating their own criteria and opinions. In this way, the media moves the masses, creating different social movements.
For almost 60 years, the people of Ambazonia were deprived of such privileges. The privilege to enhance their own criteria and opinion. They have suffered cultural genocide for 6 long decades, but not in this.
You're welcome back. Now, the flooding in Nigeria has been affecting more parts of the country in a matter of weeks. The devastating floods have been blamed on heavy rains and waters released from a dam in neighboring Cameroon. More than 600 people have been killed and about 1.4 million have been displaced in the floods, which destroyed 440,000 hectares of farmland across Nigeria. According to UNICEF, more than 2.5 million people in Nigeria are in need of humanitarian assistance, 60% of which are children, and are at increased risk of waterborne diseases, drowning, and malnourishment due to the most severe flooding in the past decade. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry Foundation have donated an unspecified amount to charities working in Nigeria to help provide relief following devastating flooding that has ravaged parts of the country. This is coming after Duchess Sussex, 41 years, revealed she is 40% Nigerian after doing a genealogy test a couple of years back. She said this in her latest Archetypes podcast series released on Tuesday. In a press release that accompanied the episode, a Spotify representative confirmed that the couple's Archwell Foundation made donations to save the children and UNICEF. Now that what the Nigerian government doing about this flooding? So far, a lot has been done to help those affected by this disaster that has been going on for weeks. Nigerian Labour Congress (NLC) has asked government at all levels to ensure adequate compensation for lives lost and properties destroyed in the devastating flooding across the country.
Now, we've also seen the leader of the Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum. We've also seen the leader of the Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum, SMBLF, accuse the federal government of its nonchalant attitude towards the plight of the citizens in the Niger Delta, adding that in Bayelsa State, there is what he described as a palpable case of humanitarian crisis, adding that most communities of the state, including major parts of Yenagoa, the state capital, are underwater. The former Nigerian Federal Commissioner for Information and South-South leader, Chief Edwin Clark, asked President Muhammadu Buhari to act fast in addressing their deplorable conditions of flood victims in the Niger Delta, just as he urged him not to abandon the people of the region. Just as the government revealed that 1.4 million persons have been internally displaced, approximately 2.7 persons injured, while 612 persons have lost their lives due to the devastating effects of the flood across the country. It distributed relief items to 21 states affected by the flood. And a couple of days later, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development, Sadia Umar Farouk, disclosed this while updating the public on the interventions made by the military by the ministry and the National Emergency Management Agency NEMA on the flood situations across the country. Giving updates on the flooding, she said as of October 24, 2022, about 3.2 persons were reportedly affected by the flood this year. Also, 181,600 houses were partially damaged, and another 123,807 houses totally damaged. In addition, 176,852 acres of farmlands were partially damaged, while 392,399 acres of farmlands have been totally damaged.
Now, looking at the untold stories of this flood in Nigeria, causing all this tragedy, the dam causing the flood in Nigeria is called the Legdo Dam of Cameroon, built in 1977, with an agreement with Nigeria to build a counterpart dam called the Hausa Dam that was supposed to be twice half the size of the Legdo Dam Cameroon built. Dasin Hausa Dam serving as a cushion effect of the Legdo Dam in case it gets full and needs to pour out its excesses. Now, why build a dam in the first place? Why not? The Legdo Dam serves as irrigation to about 15,000 farms, with the Dasin Hausa Dam also to serve as irrigation to farms in states and regions around the region, and also provide 300 megawatts of electricity to that environment. But due to negligence and bad government, the Dasin Hausa Dam was never completed, the dam since 1981, and instead, in 2013, Nigeria entered into another agreement with Cameroon that before the Legdo Dam be opened to release water, that it should be given prior notice, that is, after it has already caused the first flood in Nigeria in 2012. Now, from this untold story, not only do you see abandonment and negligence by Nigerians government, but also you see the government clearly choosing to prepare for the consequences of the catastrophe we see today happening in Nigeria than preventing it in the first place. The lives lost, the displacement and vulnerability, even vulnerability to an epidemic, they prefer to have a after effect to it instead of a prevention to this.
Seen bad government usually being a huge part of the crisis in most corrupt countries. Take a look at these same floods that first started in our own country. We found causes besides poor town planning as the administration giving a part of the land out to an individual. A land that helps drains our water given out to an individual to use as his own discretion. In consideration of our terrible administration, and now we have these same scenarios playing out in our neighboring Nigeria, outright nonchalance, you might say. Well, looking at what other politicians had to say about this, Ifeanyi Okowa, governor of Delta State, has asked the federal government to build new dams and desilt major rivers in the country to check flooding.
Now, Peter Obi, the presidential candidate of Labour Party Nigeria, has already been proactive about the disaster, suspending his campaign activities and visiting many affected areas, proffering suggestions on how to aid the situation. Mr. Obi has also called on the candidates of other political parties to suspend their campaigns and join him to help the flood victims. He said this when he visited the Benue State Governor Samuel Ortom in Abuja. Mr. Ortom's part, he admonished Nigerians to go into the 2023 general elections with the mindset of electing the best presidential candidate, as it says Nigeria currently runs on oxygen, something I could say for a lot of other African countries too, and would need hands-on and detribalized leaders to restore hope, development, and progress. He also called on the federal government to ensure that rivers are desilted to avoid reoccurrence of the floodings.
Samson Oji, who was governorship aspirant of the People's Democratic Party in Abia State, Nigeria, has also declared his support for Peter Obi, presidential candidate of the Labour Party. In his words, he says, I am a PDP man till tomorrow, he says, but our real support will be not because he is Igbo, but because of what he represents. Obi is a movement. My family and friends will vote for him, he said.
In the end, this is where the future of every country lies, the government. Having the right to choose who you want to rule you, being wise and sensitive enough to choose the right can save a country.
We the people, ABCAmbaTV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa with untold stories, Africa's best.
And on the foreign scene, the heaviest of battles lies ahead in case Ukrainian troops advance on occupying Russian forces to a Ukrainian presidential advisor. While Russia's grip on the strategic territory is shakier than in previous months, it does not appear ready to abandon it. Rather, it appears to be digging in for prolonged fighting after ordering civilians to evacuate and inviting remaining men to local joint militias.
Russia has sent a letter to the United Nations pushing its unsubstantiated claim that Ukraine is preparing to use a nuclear-laced dirty bomb on its own territory. In a 310-page document, it outlined Ukraine's plan to use bioweapons, allegations vocally rejected and largely debunked by Ukrainian and Western officials and weapons experts. Meanwhile, a member of Russia's Security Council has called for the desatanization of Ukraine, claiming the country is home to hundreds of satanic sects and radicalism. The claims were met with ridicule by Ukrainian public figures. Russia has no need to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine, its defense minister said, describing media speculations that Moscow might deploy nuclear or chemical weapons in absolute lies. From a military point of view, there is no need to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine to achieve the said goal, he said.
The main purpose of Russian nuclear weapons is to deter a nuclear attack, Sergei Shoigu said during a speech at an international security conference in Moscow. He blamed the media for spreading speculation about whether Russia would use nuclear weapons in a special military operation or about the readiness to use chemical weapons. All these informational attacks are absolute lies. Just to add to all of these stories coming in from Ukraine, 1.4 million people are without running water across war-affected eastern Ukraine. Damages to the water network and power cuts off an additional 4.6 million people across Ukraine without adequate access to safe water. Now, report has it that a young boy, David, and his mother traveled to the council building in Pavlobil, eastern Ukraine, to collect safe water. More than 7 weeks of intense hostilities in Ukraine have devastated both water and electricity network, leaving 1.4 million people without access to safe water in the east of the country and a further 4.6 million people with only limited access.
Put that in total, and you see over 6 million people in Ukraine struggling every day to have drinking water, one of the most human needs. Since the start of the war on 24th February, at least 20 separate incidents of damage to water infrastructure have been recorded in eastern Ukraine alone. The most recent intensification in the Donbass region and spread use of explosive weapons in populated areas threatens to put the water system already impacted by the previous 8 years of conflicts to the edge of a complete collapse.
Now, water is essential for life and a right for everyone, said Osnat Lubrini, the humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, warning about the health risks caused by water stoppages, particularly for children and the elderly. Poor water quality can lead to disease, including cholera, diarrhea, skin infections, and other deadly infection diseases. People are having to live in crowded conditions and unable to follow basic hygiene measures. This has to be solved, added Lubrani. The is particularly critical in Mariupol, where tens of thousands of people are likely to be using dirty sources as they seek any water they can find.
Major cities across Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast are also cut off from water supply, and an additional 340,000 people risk losing access to safe water if a reservoir in Holivka runs dry. Sumy and Chernihiv cities experienced serious water stoppages in early March, and Kharkiv's system was also seriously affected. Restoring water access and providing emergency supplies to these cities and other areas of intense fighting has been extremely challenging. Since the start of the conflict, humanitarian organizations in Ukraine have received reliable reports that 4 water technicians have been injured in Chernihiv and 1 in Kharkiv, adding to at least 35 water engineers who have been killed or injured in Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast since 2014.
And in sports, Australia has released a collective statement against Qatar's human rights record, becoming the first 2022 World Cup team to do so. The video message criticizes the World Cup host treatment of migrant workers and the LGBTQ people.
Football Australia also released a statement saying the suffering felt by workers and their families caused by the tournament cannot be ignored. Gabellison has more.
Latest world sports. Football. World Cup 2022. Australia player ties human rights record of hosts Qatar in video. Australia has released a collective statement against Qatar's human rights record, becoming the first 2022 World Cup team to do so. The video message criticizes the World Cup hosts' treatment of migrant workers and LGBTQ+ people. Football Australia also released a statement saying the suffering felt by workers and their families caused by the tournament cannot be ignored. Australia will play at the tournament in Qatar, which starts on November 20. The video, which features 16 players, calls for effective remedy for migrant workers and the decriminalization of same-sex relationships. The 16 Australia players involved in the video include Captain Matt Ryan, Sunderland defender Bailey Wright, Hearts Sky Rollis, and Alex Wilkinson, the president of Players Union Professional Footballers Australia, who last represented the Socceroos in 2015. Addressing these issues is not easy, and we do not have all the answers, the player said. We stand with FIFPro, the Building and Woodworkers International, and the International Trade Union Confederation, seeking to embed reforms and establish a lasting legacy in Qatar. These must include establishing a migrant resource center, effective remedy for those who have been denied their right, and the decriminalization of all same-sex relationships. These are the basic rights that should be afforded to all and will ensure continued progress in Qatar and a legacy that goes well beyond the final whistle of the 2022 FIFA World Cup. In the message, the players acknowledged some reforms such as the abolition of the kafala system, which enabled employers to take away workers' passports and block them from leaving the country. However, said these were inconsistently applied and do not go far enough. Basketball. NBA. LA Lakers lose 110-99 to Denver Nuggets. The LA Lakers lost at the Denver Nuggets to slip to a 4th defeat in 4 games at the start of the NBA season. Nikola Jokic scored 31 points for the Nuggets in a 110-99 win over the 17-time champions at the Ball Arena. LeBron James finished with 19 points and Anthony Davis 22, but the Lakers remain bottom of the Western Conference. They are one of only 3 teams still without a win. Giannis Antetokounmpo scored 43 points to help the Milwaukee Bucks maintain their 100% start to the season with a thrilling 110-99 victory over the Brooklyn Nets, who had head coach Steve Nash sent off in the 3rd quarter. The Nets led by 12 points at halftime in Milwaukee, but Antetokounmpo scored 17 points in the 3rd quarter before the Bucks pulled away in the 4th for a 3rd straight win. Nash was hauled away from officials by his own players after reacting angrily when they failed to give a foul against Antetokounmpo on Patty Mills. I was just standing up for our guys, said Nash. I thought Patty took a forearm to the throat, but Giannis right in front of the ref, and I didn't think that was fair. Damian Lillard scored 22 points but hobbled off with a calf strain as the Portland Trail Blazers suffered their first loss of the season, a 119-98 defeat by the Miami Heat in Oregon. Gab Ellison reporting from Undaunted, ABC Amber News.
And with that sports report, we've come to the end of Undaunted tonight. But before we go, here is a recap of our major stories.
Major General Tolkien Du, commander of the Bowie Warriors, gives a stern warning to toothless propagandists. A review of Chris W.R.J. 10 critical observations. Innocent young man killed by colonial La Republic du Cameroon's military in Balikumbat local government area in Dub County.
Right, we looked at the story. La Republic du Cameroon and the presidency rubbishes court decision beefed up security around him. Him is Ferdinand Ngongo. Also today on the foreign scene, we told you that Putin says risks of world conflict is high. Moscow official calls for desanitization in Ukraine. And in sports, we told you that Australia players criticizes human rights record of hosts in Qatar through a video. And that was it for tonight on Undaunted, bringing to the news on Untold Stories. On behalf of my co-anchor, that's our Undaunted crew, we say thank you for listening. I am Oni Opala.
We'll leave you with ABCAmbaTV images. Good night and God bless you.